Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosovich, George Story here for the SoonerScoop.com studios. Welcome back to the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. Josh McCuistion back in Scoop HQ Houston. And obviously the news is out there. On Sunday night, Oklahoma has relieved Seth Littrell of play calling duties. George and I did an instant reaction last night, just talking about kind of the landscape and a little bit more, I guess, in depth on the reporting that went into Sunday night and you breaking the story. Good to catch up with you, Josh. We just recorded a recruiting report that you can check out here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel, but did want to, I guess, keep with the rhythm of the season. Gameday Rewind. Let's just start here. I can't ever remember being in a stadium, let alone in Norman, where the game was over after maybe the first play, certainly after the first 9 offensive plays. The 3 turnovers were catastrophic. You dig yourself a 21-point hole and just literally could never get out of it. You have an offense that might be one of the worst in the country. It's certainly one of the worst that Oklahoma was put on a field in my lifetime. So that's a long time as I get up there in age. I guess, let's just start here with Seth. The movement, we did the Eskridge Lexus postgame podcast on Saturday night after the game. I think that we all four, me, you, George, Carrie, I think we all left knowing that Sunday there was going to be some type of news. It was almost a boiling point of you had to do something. Not necessarily if you were surprised by the move, but moving forward, where do they go from here? I mean, this is an offensive line that might be one of the worst Oklahoma's literally ever put out in the program's history. It doesn't seem like there is a whole lot of things that you can bank on and say, okay, this is at least a grounding point or a foundation point of what Joe John Finley now inherits. Where do they go from here? I guess just your thoughts on Seth Littrell, the move that seemed obvious to a lot of us, and moving forward.
I'm going to focus on Seth Littrell because where to go from here, I don't have a clue, Eddie. Like I don't know what you do with this train wreck that is in front of all of us right now. I think George is right in a lot of ways that this doesn't all fall on Seth Littrell. That like he's been on the job for 10 months. Like you can't tell me this is all his work. This is like it's all going to get fixed when he leaves. There's a lot of problems with this offense, and I think he has to bear the blame. And I understand, there had to be I guess a payment for all that's happened. Like you can't just keep saying, "Oh, it'll be fine, it'll be fine." Like somebody's going to have to pay the piper, and it was Seth Littrell, and that's the way this all works. We all know it. I don't know about you guys. I'd be stunned if there's not more changes. I feel like that's going to happen. What there'll be, I'm not sure. I think to some degree, this is an audition for several people to see what's going to happen. I mean, like I don't know that there's any firm decisions made, but there's a lot of guys out there that there are question marks about. I mean, and guys, in some cases we never thought there would be question marks about. So I think as far as what you can do, we've talked about it, guys. Simplify it. Be communicative. Because if there is one thing I will say, and it's the one constant thing I heard, is that this felt a lot like Lincoln Riley, where Lincoln Riley didn't have, like, there was people, designated as run game coordinator or this coordinator or whatever it may be. At the end of the day, the offense was Lincoln Riley's, and there was never any question about it until the very end. But that's a whole other story for another day. I think you're going to have to see Oklahoma work as a staff because there's no one guy that's going to have all the answers. The only guy that's got real play calling experience is not on, is an interim guy that's stepping in to fill for a role that's been vacated. So there's no good answer. It's not going to be the case. You're going to have to see if you can find a way to play offense. And, guys, if anything, scout the opponent and don't do the thing you can't do against them. Like, start from there. Start from the very basics of you're not going to run right at Tennessee. You're not going to block elite defensive ends with tight ends. Make it very simple and then see what comes from there.
Josh, what did you think of them elevating Joe John Finley? I know that a lot of fans are maybe upset by that move. I think a lot of fans were Happy to see him. Maybe not happy, but pleased to see that there was a move made in firing Seth Littrell. I think a lot of fans, though, were confused. Why Joe John Finley? We've talked so negatively about the tight end position. They've been arguably the worst unit on the team, maybe right up there with the offensive line. What'd you think of promoting him? And then also Kevin Johns, who was obviously the offensive analyst, offensive coordinator last year at Duke. He's the only guy on staff, I believe, that has ever called plays. What'd you think of that part of this move?
Yeah, with Finley, I know people are mad, but you could argue that in a way Brent Venables has tied the rope around Finley's neck and is almost about to kick the chair because, again, I don't know what Joe John Finley or anyone else. It's not a Joe John Finley thing. I don't know what anybody else is going to do to fix this problem this year. Like, you've got too much trouble. You've got too much confusion. You've got an offense that has absolutely no confidence in itself. I don't know how you fix that by a different guy calling plays. Like, I don't think that's what it is. Now, again, maybe Finley shocks me and it goes really well. But, guys, I think you're going to see more of the same problems. Now, again, like I said a second ago, maybe they can avoid some of the obvious stuff that just felt like hubris to me, like just overconfidence in what Oklahoma was. Maybe they can, again, this is what we do well, this is what we don't do well, and just we're going to run those 8 plays, and we're going to run them till, our eyes bleed. But I don't understand some of the stuff that's happened in the last month of just decision-making and seeming willful ignorance about what they were facing and the opponents they were going against. I think they can do some things to make better decisions and put their guys in better positions to make plays. But as we saw against South Carolina, you can put Brennan Thompson streaking down the field all by himself, but if a guy doesn't block the defensive end, it doesn't make a bit of difference.
Yeah, and I think with the move of Joe John and not Kevin Johns, because I think a lot of people thought they should have just put Kevin Johns as the OC. It makes sense that it's Joe John because he's been such a huge part of game planning, and some people are probably going to say, well, the game plan has sucked. And I understand your point. It's a valid point, but Joe John's been here. He knows these players. It's going to be an easier transition to look. They don't have just a ton of time to turn around and change what they're doing or any of that. Like, they need it to simplify more than make it more complicated. Whereas you bring in a guy like Kevin Johns, who's only been on staff now a few months, like it would have been really tough for him to step into a position like that.
Well, and not to mention, I think that, in a perfect world, yeah, you do make a lot of changes and you fire everybody and you try to start anew. You can't do that going into the 7th or I guess 8th game now of the season or 7th game of the season. It would seem, though, and Josh, I want to get your thoughts on the quarterback situation going into this week as they head down to Oxford. I'm at the point now coming out of Saturday. This is the lowest I've ever been on an offensive line that Oklahoma's put out onto the field. We've talked about them and the sack numbers. They're 132nd in the country. They allowed 9 sacks on Saturday, which is a school record. Let me ask you this. I need somebody to explain it to me. And you watch the offensive line quite a bit on the Monday Morning Idiot on the Crimson Corner on Soonerscoop.com. Explain to me how they put 5 guys together that seemingly is the worst offensive line in the country. When you factor in that it's not like they have a bunch of freshmen out there. It's not like there's a lot of experience. You just have catastrophic errors. It seems almost on every play. And I mean, you look at the game on Saturday, I don't know how many times you just look up and the quarterback catches the ball. The play's over because there's 4 guys back there. Are they not being? Is Bill Beatembo not? Have they tuned him out? Are they not taking coaching? Like, how is it explained that this is an offensive line that is so bad? We're talking about we talked about it on the radio this morning. This might be the worst position unit in the Southeastern Conference. How does that happen?
It is. Eddie, I struggle because, again, everybody knows I've been a huge Bill Beatembo guy for a long time. I believe in what he does. He amazes me with some of the offensive lines that were, guys, I'm going to be real. There are offensive lines that have been much better than this that weren't any more talented than this group is. Like, this isn't – like, you look at that 2013, 2014 group with, like, Derek Farniok and Bronson Irwin playing offensive tackle for you, and that's no shot at Bronson. Bronson was a good guard. He just got stuck out at tackle because he had to. You look at some of those teams and you're like, what? How did he make this happen? Like, how is this an acceptable offensive line? But it was. And this group, who has a lot of career starts, has a lot of experience, has several guys that were very high-value recruits. I mean, Michael Tarquin, Jake Sexton, Jake Taylor, those guys were national recruits when they were coming out of high school. Jake Taylor, Alabama wanted Jake Taylor. Like, so let's just be real about what we're talking about here. And now to look at it, it's tough for me to find an answer that isn't either one of, like you said, they're not listening anymore, or B, he just doesn't have the fastball anymore. Like, I don't know which one it is, and maybe there's something else that I just don't know.
Sure.
But
they've been so bad,
like,
though, you have to think, like, what am I missing here? It shouldn't. Because I'm not saying they should, even be in the middle tier, but they shouldn't be the worst unit in the country.
Yes. There's no world in which the way they have recruited, even if you want to say, oh, it hasn't been as good as recruiting as you'd like it to be, all those sort of things, they've recruited a hell of a lot better than Vanderbilt. They've recruited a hell of a lot better than Arkansas. They've, like, Arkansas had to take the scraps from the portal that Oklahoma didn't want. And, like, they're playing functional offense there. So, again, like, I'd love there to be another answer. I don't want either one of those to be right because, again, Bill Beanbo is one of the few things I've ever stand for in this program. I love watching his offensive lines work because they have always been physical and nasty. Guys, I just got done, not anywhere near done, but I'm going through the Monday Morning Idiot, and there's a play on the second series of the game that ends up being Michael Hawkins' fumble that gets returned for a touchdown. The play before that, they throw a little quick, it's not a screen exactly, but it's basically that, to Jake Roberts out in the flat. That goes for about 5 or 6 yards. It's a perfectly fine play. Jake Sexton, again, a kid I like, a kid I covered in high school. I know the family. They're good people. I don't want to say these things. Jake Sexton doesn't look like he has any interest in blocking anyone. Like, he kind of feints toward the end, and then he steps toward the linebacker, kind of brushes him, and the linebacker is the one that goes and makes the tackle in space on Jake Roberts, 15 yards to the right. Guys, it's a throw behind the line of scrimmage. The offensive line can just fire out and go hit somebody. There's no man downfield. There's none of that. And Eddie, I'm with you. Like, I don't know what I'm looking at. This doesn't make any sense to anything I've watched for 12 years. And I know a lot of OU fans like, oh, we told you this was coming. And the offensive line hasn't been good for a while. If you can't see the difference of 2019, 2020, 21, 22 against this group, you don't know what you're looking at. This is barely football.
It's almost to the point, and I again love Bill. Hate to say this. It's like, what are you guys working on at practice? It's legitimately, there are plays where guys look like they have no idea what was called. It's like they get a new 5 every week and they just throw them out there without any direction of telling them what the plays are. It's crazy.
And that's how you kind of know that this thing's been lost, because Bill's reached a point where he's just throwing guys out there. I mean, we saw it this past week. I mean, you saw Spencer Brown, you saw Logan Howland, you saw Hito Zaida, like Troy Everett got his first start. Like, they are just trying to find anything that sticks on the offensive line, and that's where I'm at, Josh. It's like,
and it's not one guy. It's somebody, or it's somebody each play that F's up just a little bit.
Yeah, and that's why I'm at the point where it's like, why not at least play some of these guys that you hope are going to be in the program next year? An Eddie Pierre-Louis, a Eugene Brooks, like those young guys that you want to develop. Hito Zaida got pulled after, I think, 9 plays in the game. It's like, let the guy play. Like he's going to be your future.
It wasn't poor.
No.
Guys, I think he got moved because Sexton was getting burned. And rather than just pulling Sexton and putting Tarquin in, they moved Sexton down into guard, which I don't think has done Jake any service. Like, I think that constant shuffling back and forth has made his life tougher.
Yeah, that's why I got asked this week, like, who's going to be the starting five on Saturday? I was like, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah.
I don't think they have any idea who's going to be their starting five on the offensive line week to week.
Maybe the same could be said for quarterback. I think one of the first things that Joe John Finley has to do this week is identify the starting quarterback and start forming a game plan around him. Obviously, Jackson Arnold went through his struggles, came back into the game on Saturday, 18 for 36. He did go over 200 yards of passing, had a nice throw to Brennan Thompson, but then again, it wasn't necessarily that he came in and just tore the thing up. Obviously, Michael Hawkins Jr. on Saturday was terrible. He'd probably be the first one to tell you that. A lot of it had to do with pressure in his face. Some of the throws were misguided. Obviously, got to hold on to the football with the scoop and score. But where do you go? Where do you go from here in terms of quarterback? Because I think that you got to start figuring out what this situation is going to be, not just for the rest of the season this year, but moving forward into 2025. And I know that opens up a whole new can of worms just in terms of who's going to be on staff, what's the staff want to look like, what's the offense want to look like. There's just so many questions right now on the offensive side of the football, but who starts on Saturday for you if you were making the decision, Josh?
For me, guys, I've got to go with Jackson Arnold, and I think there's a case to be made in either direction. I don't think Saturday was a big indictment of Michael Hawkins. Obviously, he didn't play as well as he would have wanted to, but 9 plays, he had pressure in his face on almost every snap. Like, I don't care who you are, you're not going to survive like that. To me, and I'd be interested to hear what you guys think, the thing I can't get over, and Oklahoma just doesn't have a lot of options offensively that they haven't tried and frankly failed at. Do you go with like 12 personnel, like 2 tight ends or running back? Maybe even sometimes you've got 2 backs in there and you're going to go like 2-man routes. Like we're going to try to protect, and then we can run out of that formation. We can do some different stuff like that. But that way, at least you have a chance to protect your quarterback when you are going to throw. You can't keep running these guys out there and get them murdered. You're going to have Casey Thompson on the field. Like there's a limit to how much these guys can get hit. And to me, that might be your best option against, again, another really good SEC front that's going to give Oklahoma some problems.
Yeah, Josh, I think you gotta find something to protect these guys, and that's what I'm curious to see if they change up whatever they're doing protection-wise, because you're not going to see them just totally change the offense like that. You can't do that in the middle of the season. I guess you can, but it won't work, typically. Yeah. But that's why I'm also interested to see, Joe John obviously is a Jeff Lebby guy, and I think that part of the reason why this thing has failed is you were trying to marry what Jeff Lebby was doing, or I guess what Joe John Finley wants to do, versus what Seth Littrell comes from, which is more of an air raid background. And it's just been this, like, there's no identity.
Right.
And that's why I'm interested to see, does Joe John just say, okay, we're just going to go back to the playbook last year, run a lot of the same concepts, bubble screens, things like that, deep balls, go balls, like, zone insert, which they've been running a lot of that anyways this year. But that's what I'm curious about, Josh, is are we going to see more of the, and I'm not some X's and O's savant, but I do think that maybe you could see a little bit of difference, Josh, in terms of what they're doing schematically.
You could. I mean, like, again, I agree with you, George. You can't rewrite it at this point. I would be interested to see them bring back a little bit of the RPO. I know everybody's like, oh, you got rid of it, now it's coming back. Like, I understand that. At the same time, with all you're trying to do and the way defenses are playing Oklahoma, you've got to give them something to look at, some sort of window dressing, something to throw them off, something to play against the numbers, guys, because we're just watching safeties get closer and closer and closer because they know Oklahoma is just not scary throwing the ball down the field. Again, I referenced the play earlier, but like Brennan Thompson running down the field, cool, but you can't block long enough to throw it to him. So what difference does it make? They hit one, and the other one, they've got him open. It should have been 6, and Michael Hawkins doesn't have time to throw the ball. So, again, that's the other part. Both quarterbacks, it's slow, guys. Like, they've got, I don't know, maybe taking it down, like I said, to 2 or 3 receivers, that speeds up the progression. Like, okay, we don't have to get through 5 guys. Like, we know boom, boom, or I'm running. Like, it just seems like that's a way to just simplify this game as much as humanly possible. And there's a part of me that thinks this defense, even I know as proficient at times as Ole Miss has been offensively, that if Oklahoma can find something on offense, just something, I'm not saying they're going to win the game, but I think they could keep it. Maybe they can cover. let's start there for Oklahoma.
Reminder: Oklahoma's a 20-point underdog on Saturday when they had to.
No, I wasn't going to say that. I wasn't
Oklahoma
gonna say that.
money line.
Let's be. Well, I mean, Oklahoma money line. You'd be crazy, but you'd also could be a very rich person.
Yeah,
I'd probably take Ole Miss minus the 20. It's also kind of crazy just to look back as the weirdness of Saturday. It's kind of been lost in the mix. You talk about the 9 sacks. This is another stat that is just mind blowing to me. It's been looked over, I think, to a certain extent, and we didn't talk about it a whole lot on the Eskridge Lexus postgame show. OU fumbled the ball 6 times on Saturday. That's crazy.
that's not good.
Now, they recovered 4 of them. They only lost 2 of them. It's wild to me. Real quick, just in terms of hot board, I know that there's going to be a lot of names. It is going to be a national search at the end of the season. It was noticeable, or I guess notable, that the interim tag has been placed on Joe John Finley. Do you have a favorite if you were looking at the, I guess, the landscape of college football right now, Josh?
I'll say the one that I want to say, but I don't think it's Andy Kotelnicki. You guys know I was a huge fan, and not that I'm alone in that. A lot of people really like him. I really like him. The numbers it's going to take, I certainly want to give credit to the staff, and certainly not my information, but it sounds like Oklahoma's going to be more than aggressive in this thing. At the same time, to do the numbers you're talking about with Andy Kotelnicki already making 1.6 at Penn State, you're talking some astronomical stuff there for a coordinator. So I don't know. I don't know that's possible. A couple of the guys I really like. I like Joe